Welcome, everyone, to episode 2 of Aspris podcast. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Ozan Akbas, who will be talking to us about everything gaming addiction, and mental health. Welcome, Dr. Ozan. We're really glad to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Joy. And that was the perfect pronunciation. And I especially thank you for that as well.
Thank you, Ozan. So we have a very interesting topic today.
Yeah.
And I know that gaming is something you're very familiar with for different reasons. We're going to get into that later. Maybe we can start with the most basic question.
Exactly.
So what is the difference between passionate gamers and gaming addiction?
So thank you so much for that question. The first thing that we need to define is that how do we define addiction in general, right? What is it different? Like, we all do game. Many of my friends game as well. I personally, from time to time, game as well. But where do we draw the line about how do we call a certain behavior addiction? The point that we mental health professionals, and I'm sure you do as well, where we draw the line is that, is it affecting the person's personal life? So is the person is affected socially? Has they started to isolate themselves from others? Or has it started to affect their academic life? Has it started to affect their life? Do they find themselves to be performing on lower performance? Or if you're talking about a student, has they started to miss some classes? Has their grades started to come down? Or it could, if we are talking about a child or a kid, we are talking about their chores in the house as well. Or they could also be experiencing problems in their personal hygienes and so on. So these are different signs how we can tell if the person is addicted or not. But another important point that comes down with this is that if the person is able, like, do they feel in control?
Okay.
When they're doing this particular behavior. So let's talk about gaming, right? So from time to time, when I start gaming, I usually try not to do it on my work days. Yet, let's say that I do it on my off days. Sometimes I come around at 6. I start and I say to myself, I'm going to play for 3 hours today. Then I find myself to be playing the game for 7 hours straight. At this point, I'm like, okay, I feel like this is too much. I'm just going to stop it now.
Yeah.
But
so you're able to control
your behavior.
Okay.
Or sometimes, occasionally, my wife can come in the room and say like, could you just, stop for the time being? I felt like I haven't seen you for a while. Can we just have a conversation? If I'm like, no, what are you talking about? I don't want to stop it. Or if she forcefully makes me, close down the computer and so on, and we have a conversation. And if I'm still thinking about gaming, I'm very much defensive. I feel like, and she tells me like, you game too much, and I feel defensive about it. Yeah, these are the possible signs that we can identify, or we can talk about a certain person. We can call them, maybe this is the addiction.
Yes.
But for passionate gaming, if the person is sitting down with the intention of, today it's not like a coping mechanism for that. Okay, you might have a bad day and you're like, okay, today was kind of negative. So I just want to wind down, take some time off and play some game, feel some sense of achievement or feel some sense of control for like 1 hour or 2 hours. It's called passionate gaming. Or if you're like, okay, you are talking with a buddy of yours and you're like, let's log on and play some game for 2 hours.
Yes.
Yeah. And another important point is the emotion that you leave the gaming session with. If I have played for 7 hours, oh my God, I feel tired, I feel drained, I feel like I do not have energy for nothing else. And of course, most of my responsibilities throughout my life or throughout my day, I have completely forgotten about them.
You're going to ignore. Absolutely.
Yeah, of course I'm going to ignore. But if I leave with, 2 hours or 1 hour, I'm energized. I'm like, okay, I was supposed to do that. Or, let me call a friend of mine so that we can go out. So These are the basic differences between what we call a passionate behavior in general
Yes.
or an addictive behavior in general.
Okay.
So let's talk about the basic thing is that sense of control.
Sense of control. And I thank you so much. I like that you also highlighted kind of the benefits, because you're saying sometimes you do it, you leave feeling relaxed, happy. What can we say before we delve into all of the negatives? Because I'm sure you have a lot to say about that. But what are some of the positives, even cognitively? What are some of the positives of gaming? Because we know that so many people actually enjoy it so much and are, passionate gamers, as you said.
Exactly. I mean, there are, look, I think with everything out there or with anything addictive, so there's the cutoff is the most important point. So if you talk about the benefits of the game, so now I see that many teenagers or now they are turning into early adults,
young adults,
young adults, like they used to play
even older
Minecraft
adults, yes.
So like it's actually a quite creative game. You get to create your own world, you get to experience new things, or especially if you're playing online games, you get to learn about teamwork, how to collaborate with others. Me personally, I know all my history knowledge to the Paradox games.
All your medieval learning is from
medieval about my own history, or like the history of Europe or rest of the world, or like knowing how some mechanics in the world, how do they function. So this is something crucial. Through games you can learn so many things, but the most important point is that the cutoff point.
Yes.
So the parents or the adults themselves, it should be under supervision. There should be clear boundaries to the timings and so on. So the most important point is that, it could be beneficial with certain tasks and with certain skills, but it should be under supervision. It shouldn't go down into the path of it becoming an addiction or it becoming an addictive behavior.
Absolutely. And thank you for highlighting this, because it makes it a bit more easier for parents to also understand all the benefits. I know I have a lot of children I work with that refer to some of, talking about their friends, and then I ask, okay, where's this friend? They're like, oh, they're in the other part of the world. He's my online friend. So it gives a sense of community, etc.
Yeah.
And I really like what you highlighted about control. So why is it so hard for children, for adolescents, for anyone to control this this urge and
this is actually, Joy, this is a really good question, because once we are talking about gaming addictions, we feel like we are talking about teenagers or kids only, right? But with adults, we see this behavior. I don't know. My mom, thank God she doesn't, but I know so many of her friends are almost addicted to Candy Crush.
Candy Crush, yes.
So I don't know what. Like it feels like there are like now, like a million stages in that game and so on. It just keeps on going on and on and on. So it doesn't only affect the teenagers. But for teenagers, it's like once we're talking about fully established adult brains, we are talking about something else. But once we're talking about the teenage brain, that is totally something different. So because of the fact that, when we are born, let's talk about kittens or, puppies, right?
Okay.
Once they are born, like in a year or so, they are their full self. But we humans, the latest studies suggest that we go through puberty until 25 or even 30 or something.
Our brain only fully forms at 25, which is
exactly.
Gives us time.
Exactly, definitely. But the point is that, like, once we are around the puberty time, we should be knowing the fact that our brains haven't fully formed or like hasn't been developed fully yet. So we can say that because of the fact that some they say functions aren't fully active yet, our teenage brains are more vulnerable to these type of dopamine rewarding systems.
Absolutely.
And because of we can say this: a teenage mind, if we make the analogy like a car, it has the full capacity of a throttle, yet it has limited brakes. So
full speed, no brake. Yes.
Exactly. Once they go, they just go.
Yes.
And it's really hard for them to, stop. So this is why around these times, and most of the time, these times of, sensitive change periods are,
Absolutely.
dangerous for kids. So this is how they are most susceptible, or they are more vulnerable to these, high reward, behaviors.
Systems. And it's important, I think, for caregivers to understand that it's not that adolescents do not want to control, it's just that they cannot. Can you tell us a bit more about the brain, or it's more complicated because their brains aren't fully formed? Can you tell us about the parts of the brain that are in charge and how they're affected by gaming?
You know what? You said it perfectly. I mean, in some cases, actually most of the cases, I mean, the children or the the teenagers, they don't want to do it themselves. They get bored. Or most of the teenagers that I meet here, I mean, they are quite responsible. I mean,
Yes.
They say to me like, oh, I don't want to do this as well. But most of the time, I just can't stop myself. So if your brain is overexposed to this type of things, so I just talked about dopaminergic system, right?
Yes.
This is the reward system of the brain. So this is the system where you eat a food and you feel full and you feel happy about eating a food. Like, it encourages you to do that same behavior again. So
Fair.
these games, they just kind of hijack the system. And over time, if they are overexposed, if they do this for long enough time, there are some structural changes within the brain as well. So studies have suggested us that actually there is a gray matter reduction in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. So we know for a fact that prefrontal cortex has been associated with delaying the gratification. What I mean by delaying gratification is that if you know that you're going to be full in 30 minutes with some hamburgers, yet you can't stop yourself eating just a plain bread, so it means that you weren't able to delay the gratification.
Okay.
And it also has been associated with executive functions as well, cognition, memory, decision-making skills. Another study suggested us that it actually reduces the connectivity between the limbic system, which is responsible for emotions, and again, prefrontal cortex as well.
Okay.
Another study has suggested to us that amygdala has been affected by overexposure to games as well. So that through time, if you try to stop a kid from, playing games and so on, they will be more reactive because their limbic system, their amygdala that has been associated by this emotional regulation is kind of affected by this. So actually their brain is affected by the process as well. So this is why it's kind of harder for them to stop stop themselves from this behavior.
I imagine as parents hearing this information, it might be a bit worrying. Is there,
Right.
I mean, I know we're going to talk a bit more about that, but what can be done? Because, so are these, let's say, damages, can they be undone? We know how plastic the brain is. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Exactly. When I say this to the parents first, they're like, oh my God, so like, is my child going to be affected by this for the rest of their lives?
Exactly. Are these changes in the brain reversible? Are these wirings reversible?
There is a concept called neuroplasticity. So whatever is done to the brain can always be undone. So brain is plastic. Okay, you will continue to see the effects, yet you can, reshape the brain. Absolutely. So basically what we can do is that, of course, there is an addictive behavior depends on the cases, but we co-working with psychiatrists, with the psychotherapists as well, we can try to intervene if necessary through pharmacological means, but most of the time through psychotherapy.
Okay. And we're going to delve a bit more into that, and I'm excited to hear about the therapies that you provide in your clinic at Aspris. But before that, would you have any recommendations for parents of maybe some steps that they can start at home? I imagine family dynamics play a big role. How does that affect, and what can parents do?
Exactly. I mean, family dynamics in general for the whole of addictions, they play a role. So the most important family dynamics that we see in the development of addictions is that either overprotection or it could be over freedom as well.
Okay.
So
both.
Both,
ends of the
unfortunately, both of
spectrum.
them
Yeah, yeah.
doesn't work.
Okay,
And
okay.
most of the time they might result in addictive behaviors such as these.
Okay.
So the first suggestion that I could give is that with parents, the most important thing is that it's not over freedom, but maybe we can name it as watchful freedom. So the
Okay.
kids or the teenagers, they need to, we all have been teenagers, right? We all have been kids.
Yes.
So we need to try out our boundaries. We need to find out about it. Where are the boundaries that I can hold myself in?
Absolutely.
But for parents, the most important thing is that the watchful freedom. Our kids, they have their own lives, but knowing for a fact that where are they at the time being?
Yeah.
Who are they with? Or what are they doing at this particular moment?
What a beautiful terminology, watchful freedom. So freedom, but under watchful
Exactly,
eye,
under watchful
that's
eyes.
caring and
And the point is that there is an important distinction between authoritative parenting and authoritarian parenting. So whenever we are talking about, whenever we are telling our kids that, no, you can't do this. And most of the time your kid goes like, why?
yes.
If you're not able to explain them why, like if you're more of an authoritarian parenting, you are more likely to say that because I say so.
Yes.
And most of the time this doesn't work.
Absolutely not. And we teach children to
Yeah.
always ask the why. So
Ask the whys, right?
okay, so what's the why if the parents are to psychoeducate their children? What would you say is the
We can talk about the reasons why
Yes.
we are stopping them. We can give this psychoeducational tools that we have just talked about. How is it affecting their brains?
Yes.
Or, how we just do not want them to have this, addictive behavior. We can talk about the benefits of the gaming. And we can talk about the fine line in between the addiction and this gaming as well. Because
The
if we
passion.
explain it to them like this, I'm sure none of the kids, they don't want to have any addictions to
Absolutely.
themselves as well.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Ozan. And so parenting is an important part of the support.
Very much so, very much so.
We can consider that the support starts at home.
Exactly.
But I suppose in certain cases it might not be enough. How are addictions usually treated before we delve into how is gaming addiction
I
treated?
think that's right on. Like that's very good point. So if we're talking about how addictions are treated in general,
Yes.
so we just have to first, we can put this up into two different sections. So the usual approach, it's more related on the abstinence. So let's say that if you're addicted to alcohol, and the first thing that they tell you is that you have to treat this as if you have a heart condition. So if you have if you have hypertension, right?
Yes.
So you don't need to you need to get away from salt for the rest of your life. You don't need to touch it at all. So
Okay.
it's something that is based on the goal of the client. So if the goal of the client is around, the full abstinence, the first thing that we do is that we have to treat like no gaming at all, because you're addicted to this. So it's dangerous for you. You are more susceptible to this. So you're more vulnerable to this. So we're just going to get you off from this completely. But we talked
Okay.
about the benefits of gaming as well, right?
Absolutely.
Maybe still to date, psychologists use this method too. But sometimes your clients or the parents come to you with different goals. So there is a new approach that has been founded around 1990s, around early 2000s, like harm reduction. Okay,
Yeah.
do you want to game? Okay, but let's do it in a more balanced way.
Exactly.
Let's use different tools to this as well. So these are the two different methodologies that we can use with addictions. But when we are talking about this, we are talking about the individual themselves, and
Yes.
I think it will be important for us to talk about it in the upcoming minutes as well.
Yeah.
But there is another side of the coin too. Addiction. So I do my psychotherapies in through systemic modality as well. So
Okay, systemic modality.
yeah,
Okay.
addiction is related to the family. We just talk about the parenting
Absolutely.
styles or the family style as well, right?
Yes.
The other side of the coin is about the family, the family psychoeducation, family therapy. Sometimes the kid does not find the space to talk about their feelings. Or as we have talked about it, the parent could be overprotective or the kid might have too much freedom. The most important, the first thing or the first part that we work on is the family itself. Most of the time as a psychotherapist, the parents are my co-therapists too.
Of course.
Like we work together. We collaborate on the betterment of their child together.
Absolutely.
So the most important and the first part is the family.
Yeah,
Working
the
with
parents are
family.
the experts of their own child.
Exactly,
Often,
exactly. Like this is a collaboration between the two. So okay, I'm the psychotherapist, I'm the psychologist, so I'm an expert on this. But you're an expert on your child as well, and your child is my client too, and he's or she's the expert on themselves as well. We collaborate together.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Ozan. So we
pleasure.
have a lot of families that might consult for these types of challenges. Let's say they visit you in your clinic at Aspris. How would the support look like? What are the different types of interventions that you might provide for what we're calling in this episode gaming addiction?
Exactly.
I know it's not the proper clinical term. What is it?
The clinical or the it like from in different. So we go through ICD or DSM as well. In DSM, it's named as Internet Gaming Disorder.
Okay. So when it comes to this type of presentation, how would you support, let's say, a family coming with their teenager to seek clinical support?
Very good question. I mean, the most important part here is that psychoeducation.
Yes.
So sometimes people talk about the stigma around addiction, especially. So let's talk, like there are some stigmas around, alcoholism or substance abuses and so on. But for gaming addictions, on the contrary, rather than stigma, there is actually lack of awareness.
Yes.
Or people do not know much about it. So the most important part, the first part that we take is the psychoeducation, beginning from the first session. And, including parents in the psychotherapy as well is the second crucial point that we can talk about it. Okay. The family therapy is a side to this. But when it comes to addictions, especially gaming addiction, I try to use different techniques from different modalities. So I feel like if I stuck around with only one certain modality, sometimes you feel like you're trying to squeeze the modality or like you're trying to squeeze the person into modality, right? Yeah. But the better approach that I feel like is that trying to use different tools from different modalities and help them and like trying to use which you feel like is best for the client that is sitting in front of you. So, but I use different techniques from CBT, sometimes from DBT, but most of the time my approach is around, EMDR.
Okay, that's very interesting. I know that EMDR is a very effective intervention for this type of challenges. Can you tell us a bit more about EMDR? Let's say, how would you explain EMDR to a family with a young child in a session with you?
Yeah, I mean, like I kind of do that every day for at least like if it's a new session, like on a daily basis. So let me just go through that as well. So how can we talk about EMDR? So it has a very scientific name to it, right? It stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
So, can we do that one again?
Eye movement desensitization reprocessing.
Okay, perfect.
So the point that we are talking here about is that, so we are born, we are growing up. And while we are growing up, our brain is more sensitive because our brain has to learn, right? It has to learn about so many things, language and different skills. So it almost feels like a sponge. Whatever you give to the brain, it almost just gobbles it up. It just takes it immediately, right?
And stores it.
Stores it. So, but we go through traumatic experiences as well while we are growing up. And since we usually grow up around same caregivers, mostly our parents, same peers, or similar peers, or similar school environment as well. We go through similar or certain types of traumatic experiences. So most traumas that whenever we go through a trauma, so some traumas we just process it, right? So if someone tells me that, you know what, Ozan, you're not so good at your job, I would probably.
That's not true.
Thank you, thank you so much. You're
Clients
too
would
kind.
beg to differ, but okay, let's say that's.
Let's go with this experience.
Yes,
I would probably maybe be sad for some minute or for an hour, maybe a day, maybe a week. Then I would try to think about it. Okay, why did that person tell me that? Did I did something wrong, or maybe like have I said something wrong, or like was I not giving my 100% and so on. I will try to delve into it. Then I will say that, okay, maybe with that person I had a difficult experience, but I have many other experiences that proves otherwise.
Okay.
So it's like it was a traumatic experience, yet I was able to process it.
Okay.
But with some traumas, they are so affecting, or they could be so severe to affect that your brain is just not able to process it on its own. Okay. So it just stores it.
Okay.
And when you have those similar type of experiences or those traumatic memories, they cluster together.
Okay, and they kind of group.
Exactly.
Okay.
And now because they're clustered together, they start to form this negative, what we call as negative cognition within themselves. So within your brain or within yourself, it's almost feels like putting on a glasses and looking the world with this glass from now on. So let's say that if you had experiences that revolves around the fact that like you weren't doing good enough. Let's say that you grow up with parents, you got 95 from the maths exam, and you could have gotten 100, and you're too happy, right?
Yes.
You go to your parents and you show them your report card. Look, I got 95. It was really difficult. And your dad or your mom goes like, oh, I talked with Ahmet. His son goes to
Ahmet's mom,
Ahmet's mom, and they told me that he actually got 96. So it was possible for you to get 96, right? So these type of experiences, these type of kind of traumatic experiences, they cluster in together, and they might make you feel like whatever I do, I'm just not good enough.
Okay, so they skew kind of our view of the world. This is the lenses
exactly
you're referring to.
Exactly. And they draw their strength from these experiences that we had when we were a child, right?
Absolutely.
So even when we are adults, because these traumas or because these memories are unprocessed, look at the world like this. So for everyone, especially for addictive behaviors, it could be different. You can see different type of NCs with addictive behaviors. They could be like, my addiction is my personality, or I'm not good enough, or I cannot cope with my problems without the help of my addiction. They could have this type of memories for them. So in EMDR, what we do is that because these memories are unprocessed, we take them one by one. Right? We start to work on it. So there is something called as bilateral stimulation.
Okay.
So you kind of take these memories in, and you try to help your client to almost force them into processing these memories through bilateral stimulation. So there are three main ingredients or three main channels. So there are different channels, actually, not only three, but there are different channels in EMDR. So vision, hearing, and stimulation senses is quite important. So what we do is that we give you buzzers, we give you headphones, and there is a tracker that you have to follow with your eyes. So while doing these stimulations, you also go back through this original memory as well. And through time, through interventions and so on, you kind of process this memory, so it does not hold a traumatic process for you anymore. So let's think about a processed like what does a processed memory look like. So let's go over my example, right? After I had this memory or this incident, after a week or maybe a month later, and I can while talking about it with my friend, I can tell, oh, you know what, one day someone told me this, but like You know, like I thought about it. I think I did this wrong, but I'm going to try to do better this time. So this is how a processed trauma looks like.
Okay.
And through time, through processing of enough memories, you just don't need the triggers anymore.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That's so interesting. And it's interesting that we kind of came full circle back to the brain, which was affected by the gaming, and is also one of the ways where you support families and youth and adults to kind of reprocess these memories.
Exactly. And I mean, for addictions, EMDR protocol is quite different as well, because addiction is different is a bit different from the other mental health disorders as well. You know, you have to work around the triggers for the addiction, right? There are certain situations, or there are certain sensations, or there are certain times that could be more triggering for the person.
Can you give us a few examples? That's really interesting.
Let's talk about this. So a person is using their addictive behavior. Let's say that a person is using, let's say that their parents or their family is going through a difficult time, or they just have difficult experiences in the school. So a teenager doesn't do well with maths.
Yeah.
And whenever there is a math exam or math quiz, or they just have to write something on it, they feel like they can't cope with the negative emotion that, you know, takes them over whenever they are thinking about math. They are most likely stressed, they are a bit anxious. At the same time, because of the cognitions that they are having, they are feeling a bit depressed as well. So in order to tackling on the real problem, they just go over this behavior of, okay, let me just game for the time being, because I don't want to be left alone with this negative emotion.
Okay.
So a maths exam or a math quiz could be triggering for this situation, right?
Exactly.
So this is what you want to work on. Or from time to another point that you should be working with addictions is that craving. The person could literally crave to, you know, go online, start playing, because they just need, because of the dopaminergic system, because of the reward system.
It's the same system relating to food, but it's just applied on gaming.
Exactly. They just want to go because they want to get the reward for themselves. And another point is that with all types of addiction, there is inevitably relapses.
Okay.
And relapses for some individuals could be very discouraging, very disheartening. It's really difficult to do. You feel like, oh, you worked over the problem and everything is better, and one day they just got the trigger. They just heard about the maths exam and they felt like they were doing good, but they got way lower than they expected. They could immediately go back to the original behavior as well. So these are the 3 different structures that you have to work around with addictions when it comes to EMDR.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Ozan.
My pleasure.
And just thinking of the listeners, is there any hopeful message that you can share with parents, teens, adults that are avid gamers and who might be maybe recognizing that they might have an addiction? What is a positive message you can share with them?
Of course. I mean, the first thing that I can say is that for anything in this world, there is always a solution. We can always try to do something. Sometimes it might not work. Doesn't necessarily mean that another solution won't work. So we just keep on trying and trying. And the second thing that I would like to say is that you're never alone. You're not alone. Because most of the time, with mental health disorders, it's not something that people speak up openly, right?
Yes.
So most of the time, whenever we are going through that difficult period, we feel like we are alone.
Absolutely.
But on the contrary, actually, so many people are going through these things. And the last thing that I can say is that, as I have said earlier, nothing done can't be undone. So there is always a solution to every problem that we can face.
Okay, that's a very hopeful message. Thank you so much for your words. So. Thank you so much for your time. This was such an interesting discussion. And I look forward to more discussions about maybe EMDR a bit in more depth, or any topic. And we really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise. And I'm sure this is going to be very helpful. We get so many questions about gaming addiction and what type of support is available. So really happy we got to spend time and just scratch the surface with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was a very big pleasure for me to be here as well. Thank you so much for your time,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Joy. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I'm Joy Habib. I was your host for this session, and stay tuned for more episodes with Aspris Podcasts.